Welcome, everyone, to Play Like a Champion national webinar on the state of youth and high school football. We are thrilled to invite you to be here to have a very important conversation and to listen to some experts in the field and experts that are part of our community. We're going to hear today from Dr. Joe Congeni, from Michael Carlson and David Bodine and Marty Rains, and I will individually introduce them as they each will begin their presentation, but you should be able to see the presenters right now. But to begin, as we do with all things at Play Like a Champion, I would like to offer a prayer. So if we can say, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. This is a prayer for those involved in sports. Oh God, you gave us bodies as well as minds and hearts with which to praise and worship you. Our sports and exercises are a fitting use of gifts and talents that you have given us. Bless our workouts and the games that we play, and those with whom we exercise and compete. Give us strength, endurance, courage, and agility as we compete and train. Keep us safe and healthy as we celebrate our physical and mental skills in sport and exercise our character through good sportsmanship. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. And so that is just a reminder, on our website, we have daily prayers posted, and that is one of our daily prayers from just a few days ago. If you click on the daily hand or the daily, just a prayer icon like this, you will get a variety for coaches, for athletes, for leagues, just in general athletic prayers. And they do change daily, so make sure you access that resource. Now I'm going to turn it over to Pete, who is going to give you the details of the question and answer period and how you can record your questions and the flow of the whole morning.
All right, absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Excited to have you here. A couple of quick sort of logistical things to help you out here. If you have your webinar open on the screen, on your computer screen, it's really easy. There's the toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. I guess usually it's on the right-hand side. It could be somewhere else on your screen. And you'll notice on there that there's a number of different sort of drop-down menus. You will be automatically muted just so that we don't have 30 people kind of background noise going on. But we will be able to unmute you from our end if we need to, if you have a question or would like to speak. A couple of different ways we can do that. There's a couple different sort of options down at the bottom right-hand corner of your toolbar. One is the chat. There's a chat function. You can use that at any time to ask a question. I'll be monitoring those throughout the hour. And then there's also a question panel right above that. And you can use that as well. So I'll monitor those. We can pull in questions that way. You can also do what's called raising your hand. You should have a little hand there somewhere on your toolbar. And if you see that, then you can click that hand and it actually will basically alert me that you want to say something. So much like going back to grade school, we can raise our hands and I can call on you that way. But anyway, that'll allow us to ask some questions and have some discussion as we go forward, and that should be good. One other thing to note, there's a couple of handouts we may reference. One is actually just a sheet that kind of shows you what I just said. If you forget throughout the presentation how to reach out and ask a question, there's a logistics PDF. There's also one that Dr. Congeni will reference, and those are in the handout section. So again, should be right above your chat drop down on that menu bar. Over on your menu bar, you'll see a handout section, and those are PDFs that you can access. You can download them, click them. So if we reference something, we can put it right there, and we'll have those available for you. One final thing, we will also provide a recording of this webinar to everybody who's on the call. We'll send out an email probably this afternoon that has the recording available. And plan to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen and look forward to this conversation.
So again, the flow will be, we're going to have 3 presenters, and we invite you to write any questions or comments that you have, but we plan to address the questions and the comments and have the conversation following the 3 presentations. And our first presenter is Dr. Joseph Congeni, who is the medical director of the Sports Medicine Center at Akron Children's Hospital, as well as a professor of pediatrics at Northeast Ohio Medical University. Dr. Congeni is currently a team physician for the University of Akron and Archbishop Hoban High School. He's been doing work with the high school since 1988. So Dr. Joe, I'd like to invite you and appreciate your comments here.
Great, thanks for having me today. I hope everybody can hear me. This is a forum I haven't used as much before. I'm not up on my screen, Peter. Am I up on the other screens? Okay, there we go. So I guess if we're going to do the audio, not that I necessarily need to be seen, but let's get started today. And I talked to Kristen and Peter about maybe 10 or 12 minutes of kind of kicking off this topic, and the topic being the future of youth tackle football in America as we stand in 2018. And I want to just very briefly mention my hospital system, which really allows me a lot of leeway to get involved in a lot of regional and national programs. So the Children's Hospital of Akron is the 8th largest children's hospital in the country. We were the first one to have a sports medicine center in 1988 and a fellowship in 1990. And so I'm speaking today from Akron Children's, where I've been the director for 30 years plus, and I've been a coach for 17 years, CYO coach for my 6 kids. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit about this topic. We know that when we're talking about football in youth, we're talking about there's a lot of different youth programs. There's CYO, there's Pop Warner, there's USA Football. The thing that's kind of frustrating is there's no NCAA for youth football, so it's hard with rules changes and things like that because it's so fragmented. There's so many different groups. But one thing we do know in the last 5 years, there's no question about any argument about the fact is the numbers are falling in youth football in any of those programs that we look at. As we get out and talk a lot about concussion and head injury, I think that's one of the drivers of that. There may be others as well. But anywhere from some studies saying as much as 18 to 17% decrease in the last 5 years of kids playing youth football. If kids continue to play less youth football, less high school football, we may not have college and professional football around in the future. So we see it as a way of trying to figure out this problem and really trying to save football is what we're trying to do. There's still over 1 million kids that play football. Some studies show upwards of 2 million kids. So it is number 1 in participation. It's just that number is falling. And so there's 4 debate points that I want to talk about in the next 10 minutes because these are somewhat that are controversies that Kristen has come up with and the team about what they'd like to talk on. And the first debate point would be when should kids start in youth football? And we start by when do they start now? We have 6 studies going on related to concussion at Akron Children's, and one of them is looking at youth participation. We see that in the greater in Northeast Ohio area, a lot of kids start as young as age 8 with tackle football. The debate now is that there's a lot of people talking about should kids play football less than 14 years of age. That's an age range that a lot of people are using. It's an age range that they've used in other sports like checking in hockey, only below age 14. Heading the ball in soccer, less than age 14. So many people are coming out with and saying no tackle football before age 14. But like any other recommendations we make, we want some good science to back that up. And as of right now, there isn't a lot of totally convincing evidence that would significantly reduce the injury rate. In fact, one study that was done at the University of Iowa by one of our members of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Peterson, came out in 2016, seemed to show that there was no significant difference of kids playing flag at the younger age versus tackle. Now, there are some issues and limitations. That was a first attempt study. We're looking at a study this year to try to get more answers in that area, but we're not altogether clear. On the other hand, there's a lot of national experts And some of the national experts are like a neurosurgeon from Boston who's well known nationally by the name of Dr. Cantu. He says that brain development, or the connectivity of neurons in the brain, of the brain working together, really doesn't take place fully till age 10 to 12. And so he has made a strong recommendation on his part, saying he believes kids shouldn't play tackle before age 14. And in our world of seeing a lot of pediatric athletes being at a children's hospital, there are 3 challenges in kids playing contact or collision sport. This isn't just a football thing, but today's discussion is just a football thing, as injuries occur in soccer and basketball and other with head injuries. But in football, 3 issues in young athletes. Number 1, the brain development I just mentioned from Cantu. Number 2 is what we call in sport medicine the bobblehead effect, is many kids don't have the strength of the shoulder girdle and the neck and even the core to be able to maintain, and they look more like a bobblehead effect. And when they get hit, one of the biggest mechanisms is that whiplash or snapback mechanism that can occur. And so we strongly recommend kids that are going to play contact sport, particularly football, should be working in conjunction on a strengthening program for head and neck musculature, for neck and shoulder girdle musculature. Number 3, no athletic trainers around, or very few in the youth setting. The number 1 way that we pick up concussions early on are athletic trainers in the high school setting. They're the best people. They're the dirty hands people. They're the hardest working people. They're out on the sidelines, and they see some of these early subtle findings when it's best to pick up that injury. And many places do not have athletic trainers in the junior high setting. And that's something I'm trying to work on through legislation, at least in Ohio, to see if we can get more athletic trainers in the youth setting. But that's point number 1, the debate of what age. And what's usually being looked at is below 14. Is there enough evidence? There's people arguing on both sides of that issue. And I want to move into point number 2. Point number 2 is flag football positioned right now to fill the void if we did away with tackle below age 14. And there are a lot of flag football studies out there. A lot of the recommendations are flag until high school. And one of the questions is, will enough people play flag, or would the numbers just drop off so significantly? And then would there be risk of kids starting up as freshman year in high school, never having played the game of football before? There are studies being done, but no convincing evidence. And there's people on both sides of this saying that there is evidence that you can enhance flag to make it better and that it's increasing in some parts of the country. There are people saying that there is not an increased risk of kids playing for the first time, playing tackle and learning technique and making 7th and 8th grade flag, maybe even padded flag, where you're teaching the techniques of tackling and blocking, but without playing tackle football. Many people point to anecdotally Tom Brady, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, others famous players who have played football who never played until their freshman year, until they were in high school, and did quite well, by the way. But that's anecdotal evidence. We need good scientific evidence, and right now there's not good scientific evidence. On the flip side, there's great discussion about the values of football, the hard work, the self-confidence you learn, the resilience, the ability to work together as a team, learning how to win, learning how to lose. These are known in our circles as the bedrock values. Where else could kids learn bedrock values? Are there other team sports? Yes, there are. I was a basketball player primarily, but bedrock values are probably, a lot of people felt, really fit very well with the sport of football and youth football to learn those values. And we want to keep kids competing. Remember, the kids that are at most risk are the very large kids, linemen and others in a sport like football, that if we take football away, flag, I've coached flag. If you play flag and coach flag, it's a speed game. There isn't as much need of bigger players playing. It can be done in a conference. Those are the kids we most need to reduce obesity, get them out playing on a regular basis. And those are some of the issues when people look at both sides of the issue of should we enhance flag and could we make it better? I think I'm doing okay, Kristen, on time. I'm moving into number 3. The third area I want to talk about today is what's the real risk. And there are some studies here that I want to touch on. The most known study that everybody brings up is the Brain Collector study. This study is out of Boston University. It's gone on for at least 2 decades, where they have looked at pathologic specimens of people who played the game of football. And you can only do that as of 2018 by way of when they pass away and looking at these studies under a microscope. And in looking at the Brain Collector study, they've been collecting these brains, and they have found a condition for the last 20 years we've talked about called CTE. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy is abnormally disorganized activity of the brain. Normally, the brain is very well organized with neurons or brain cells, and what they've found in some of these pathologic specimens is disorganized area of people that have gone on to issues like cognitive deterioration, dementia, suicide. The numbers are relatively small. There are millions of kids that play tackle football every year. The numbers we've looked at the BU study, the Boston University Brain Injuries, is still under 400 people that we've looked at. The recent study that came out in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, is a very well-known journal, 2017. It was misinterpreted by a lot of people. They looked at 202 football players and said that 177 had CTE. People came out and then said, everybody who plays football, virtually 80-90% get CTE. They were looking at only the people who had donated their brains that had had the worst outcomes clinically, a smaller number. Am I worried about that number? I'm worried about that number. I've spent 30 years trying to figure this problem out. I'm worried about CTE. But remember, it's a small number still that we're looking at. And in their study of the 202, they looked at over 111 were in the NFL that had average 15 years of brain hits in that period of time. We're talking about youth football today. Am I still worried? There were 3 high school players in the most recent study. 3 of 19 high school players had changes of CTE in high school. Yes, that worried me, but that is still, of all the people who play, you could look at things like car accidents and drug abuse and other things for teenagers. The number was small, but I am worried about those cases of CTE. They did find some high school cases. They did find 48 college cases, but the majority in the Brain Collector study are professional that had played at least a dose of, on average, 15 years of tackle football. In the meantime, there's a study that was done in JAMA, came out later in 2017 called the Wisconsin Longitudinal Study. This is a study that a lot of football players have been telling me for years they want to have done. In Wisconsin, they did it. They looked at 10,000 Wisconsin students in 1957 of all things. Oh my gosh, that was a good year, the year before I was born. They have followed these people for 60 years. And they looked at them about after 50 years, they looked at them about 6 or 8 years ago, and they broke out 3 categories of the 5,000 they could still find that were around. Those that played football, those that played non-contact sports, those that played no sports at all. And they looked at 3 areas. What number had dementia or cognitive deterioration? What number had major depression? What number had alcohol addiction? In those 3 areas, in those 3 categories, football, non-contact, or no sports. And looking at those people 50 years later, the numbers were the same in all 3 categories. So sometimes we're looking only at one. We don't know the denominator. We don't know the numerator when we're looking at the CTE study. How many people have played to look at those 200 or 400 that brain we're looking at? Does it worry me? Yes. Wisconsin Longitudinal Study showed we really don't know the real risk. There's a lot of studies going on, and we're trying to get to the bottom of that. That's question number 3. Question number 4 is, for me, where I'm spending most of my time related to concussion, and that's prevention. And in the area of prevention, there's 4 major areas. We do a lot of education. When we're out with coaches and athletes and families, we want them to know what are the signs and symptoms early on. The sooner we pick up concussion, the better the outcomes. Every study shows that. So we're trying to educate athletes. We're looking at technique and tackling technique. Our coaches today are going to talk about there are some better techniques that can be beneficial in tackle football. We're looking at equipment. my hospital, and I get approached weekly by people that have a new device to help us diagnose on the sidelines, to help us know when the brain is recovered, helmets and other things for protection. So we're looking at equipment that might someday help us solve this problem. We're looking at rules changes. The guys are going to talk, and coaches are going to talk about rules changes a little bit more, but I'll just say that many of the early rules changes were only in the NFL, and we're looking at the top down. The least amount of people are playing in the pros, a little bit more in college. The bulk of kids playing are in youth, high school and youth. And we need more studies when we're looking at rules changes and more changes for the younger levels. And I think the coaches are going to talk about some of those. Clearly, one for sure, for instance, is reducing the kickoff rule. The kickoff is the number one play by far. At every level, we've tried to make some changes in the kickoff because it's the number one play by far. And I'm really in favor of saving this game, that we really look at least in high school, doing away with kickoffs altogether. We're moving in that direction. We have in youth, we have in JV, we have in freshmen. The kickoff is, so those are the kinds of things the coaches are going to talk about, some rules changes. And in my world, it's research. We have 6 studies going on. When we look at research, we look at prevention, we look at more rapid diagnosis early on, we look at treatment might help, and we look at assessing brain recovery. We need help in those 4 areas, so we need research to better answer these 4 questions I talked about today. And I just want to finish by saying, for me, I'm not on one side or the other. I don't think we have enough evidence yet to say. My job is to try to save the game, and in the meantime, save the brain of the young athletes that I come in contact with. 30 years, that's my job right now that I'm trying to work on doing. So I love the opportunity to educate, as we've gotten a chance to do today. I don't think there's enough evidence to make hard and fast guidelines yet, but I'm following every study that comes out every week. And I will tell you, just last thing, disclaimer for me, 6 kids, 2 boys, personal experience. Everybody asks it. Both of my sons played football. Both of my sons would say it was great experience for them. My oldest son would say it was probably the greatest experience of his life, played into college football. My younger son, unfortunately, had one major problem for his career. He had to be coached by his dad. So I coached football too, youth football. And so there are a lot of real strong positives about this game. I'm trying to help it saving it. There are a lot of things that worry us too about some of the studies I told you earlier. And now I really want to hear from the coaches giving us some more information about being in the trenches and what it's like out there. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joe. That was excellent information to know the research and to hear your thoughts on where the research is, and to know we need to continue to follow the research. And so we're talking football. So we definitely had to go to Texas to bring in 2 fine gentlemen who work with Play Like a Champion, who live, eat, and breathe football, and are great examples to our national community. And so we're welcoming David Bodine and Michael Carlson from Fort Worth, Texas. David is the head coach for Nolan Catholic High School football team. He's been there since 2016, and he doubled their win total in 2017. And right now they are at 6-1, headed into the 2nd game of the districts this Friday for Friday Night Lights in Texas. We're going to wish you good luck on Friday. Also from the same community is Michael Carlson, who is the athletic director for the entire Diocese of Fort Worth. They offer a number of sports: football, volleyball, soccer, track, tennis, and baseball. And Michael also is an assistant football coach for the Nolan Catholic High School football team. And so Dave and Mike are going to address football from a practical perspective in their daily lives. Welcome, Mike and Dave.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to start really for us. We owe a lot to at the diocesan level. It all starts from the top. So for us, Bishop Olson, you can't ask for a better advocate and understands the evangelization of our faith through sports. is a tremendous advocate for youth sports and high school sports here at the diocese, and is really involved, has gotten us involved with the Play Like a Champion program. And so we're extremely grateful from that standpoint. And also to have Michael Carlson, who's our diocesan athletic director, involved here at the high school level to sort of create a vertical alignment in our sports. So I'm going to turn it over to him to start from a kind of a middle school perspective, while he also coaches high school, can offer a lot from that standpoint.
Yes, thanks, Dave. So with our middle school programs, specifically in football, we actually begin playing in 5th grade, and for our 5th and 6th grade, we play 7-on-7. So not flag, we play actually a touch 7-on-7 league. And with that, of course, we make sure that all of our coaches are trained with Play Like a Champion, but not just Play Like a Champion. We also make sure that all of our coaches are come to some form of training with the football coaches here at Nolan. That's kind of the biggest challenge with our diocese, in all honesty, because Nolan in Fort Worth specifically, Nolan is the flagship high school. It's the one high school with varsity athletics, whereas our diocese does extend into Wichita Falls, where we do have a high school there, Notre Dame Catholic, and in Munster, where we have Munster Sacred Heart, and they have their own varsity sports. But you're talking about 2 hours, an hour and a half away from Fort Worth. So majority of our schools fall in Fort Worth and the DFW area, so they feed into Nolan. So Nolan doesn't house its own middle school program, or middle school in general. So trying to align our football teams with what Nolan does on the football field is very important to us. So training coaches becomes a very high priority for that. At the beginning of the year, they come to training and ask great questions, but the main thing that they want is honestly to learn what we're doing as coaches at Nolan, offensively and defensively, so that they can start teaching the kids kind of the concepts that we work in football. And that's really important to us, and it's great that they are so eager to learn that, because any coach will tell you that they would love to align their entire program from senior year all the way to whenever they start playing football within the school or within the ISD, and start running the same thing, so that it becomes easier once they get to high school. It's not just with football and basketball, as well. Start running the same system. So that's very important. But where that comes to with the safety aspect, and what's where we have our touch football, is you kind of lose out on teaching some of the tackling. In 7th and 8th grade is when we begin our tackle football league. Right now we have one team that is combined of all the schools in the diocese, and as we continue to grow, we hope to continue to add teams within our diocese, so that we have just more than one. We would love it to where each school has their own. Right now we're not at that position, but again, it really comes down to a lot of the coaching training, and training our coaches in tackling, and then not just teaching them what our philosophy is, in that we've moved to the philosophy of the rugby style tackling, which is going across the nation. Coach Bowden and myself have been coaching together for 7 years now. We started together in San Antonio, and it was probably about 6 or 5 years ago that we made a shift to the rugby style or hop tackling system. And it wasn't just for more than just the safety positives of it. There was research that also showed fewer missed tackles and things like that. So also from a game standpoint, we're always thinking about safety, we're always thinking about training, but from a game standpoint, it also just made sense. And it's actually really funny, because the very first game we had, we were all nervous about it. And the very first game of the very first play, we had a freshman linebacker go and make a perfect fundamental hawk tackle, rugby style tackle. And it was just kind of this sigh of relief of, okay, here we go. So it's not just about teaching and training in that. It's also about showing the types of drills to do to teach the kids. And at a young age, lining up in lines and having 15 kids in a line just isn't going to cut it when you talk about attention span for them, and then attention to detail from the coaches. So we teach a lot of different games, tag games, capture the flag type games, very small area games that we can show the kids that build those types of skills. So it's not just about teaching the technique, it's also about keeping it fun and keeping it fresh for them that is going to keep them engaged and keep them wanting to learn more and show how great and fun this game can be, even in the technical aspect of it. So that is huge for us, because like you said, with numbers, we have to make sure that we continue to keep the kids that are there coming out. It's not just about gaining new kids, it's also about keeping the kids that are already playing. So even at the high school varsity level, we still do some of these tag games, especially during camp. We carry it through a weekly basis throughout the school year. Our kids, if we say 5-yard tag, they know exactly where we're going and what to do in it. And that's not just about the technique of it, but it's also just about making sure that we're continuing to have fun, so that we're holding on to those attrition. Finally, the last thing I'll touch on is the summer program that we offer here at Nolan. Nolan offers a summer strength and conditioning program, and we're actually very fortunate. Not a lot of schools do have what we have, and we have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. On top of that, we have 2 full-time athletic trainers at Nolan who do come out and help during the summer programs. The summer programs are offered to all of our middle schoolers as well. We do need to do a better job of making sure that we bring more kids out, but we do every single year have middle schoolers come and join the summer strength and conditioning program. And what Coach Cook, our strength and conditioning coordinator, does very, very well is focusing on the building of neck strength, especially for football. That is, he has his NPN, no pencil necks, kind of mantra that we chant in the weight room to make sure that continues to be a focus for the kids. So at the middle school level, and kind of aligning that into what the high school does, those are our main focuses, is keeping it fun, making sure that we're continuing to train our coaches and not just teach what the philosophies and techniques are, but also teaching drills for them to use and games for them to use. And then on top of that, for our tackle practices, we have the best 7th and 8th grade coach in Coach Josh Christian. He's absolutely incredible in everything that he does, and the parent volunteers that come out have completely bought into him and what he teaches, and making sure that we have our varsity coaches at those practices as well weekly, to make sure that the things that we're trying to teach do get across. There's always going to be some type of disconnect in what you can learn and teach a middle schooler compared to what we're learning on varsity, but to try to close that gap and align the programs is so important to us at the middle school level, at the diocesan level, that Dave has made a huge commitment to make sure that we focus on that. So, Coach, if you want to take it from there.
Sure. And Kristen and Pete, let me know how we're doing on time. But from a high school standpoint, our biggest thing is to have a presence at the middle school level, right? And from a holistic standpoint. And so what I mean by that is we're not there just as a recruiting tool or, just to say that we're there as a political move. I think those things are important. I think, you can't, you can't evangelize your faith and have access to these kids if they're not here at the high school level. But having a presence for the safety of the game, and we're very passionate about protecting this game because we know it's under attack. We understand that. But really having a presence down there and having vertical alignment from middle school to high school is extremely important. So where do we begin? I think having a cohesive unit, one, and the number one thing I tell our middle school coaches is your job is to make them want to come back the next year, right? That's their number one job, of course, other than safety, which we're gonna talk about. But I think that all kind of is intertwined, right? I think if you take if safety is a priority, then these kids are going to want to come back. We don't have, gone are the days, in my view, anyhow, of the caveman approach where you're just lining up 30 yards apart and running into each other. One, that's not very productive. And it doesn't get anything accomplished, and it's not very safe. I know, and Dr. Congeni, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think more than the research I've read, more than half the concussions actually happen in practice. And so I think how you practice is a really big deal. And so what we do from the high school level is not bury our head in the sand. Rather, we understand that there's some inherent risk, just like there is in any contact sport. And we want to make sure that we educate our community, right? I think the game is as safe as it's ever been. Doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go. We do. But in terms of equipment, and we talked, I know you talked about helmets and techniques. We use a shoulder leverage-based tackle, keeping the head out of it. There's certain times where the head's going to be just to be involved. We do everything we can to minimize that. And like I said, we use a rugby-style tackle, so we do a lot of that stuff without pads. We're able to get a lot of repetition in without using any pads at all. I think that's a huge advantage. I think when people look at it, they say, well, doesn't your tackling, doesn't it get worse? And in fact, we've noticed it's gone the opposite. It's gotten a lot better without contact. And so we have the resources to use crash pads. So we're not taking kids down to the ground in practice. And when we are, there's a crash pad there, so you avoid sort of the common concussion where the head is coming off the turf. And so we're doing that. We also put a lot of, like Coach Carlson said, put a lot of emphasis on neck strength. And even at the middle school level, we don't have the resources necessary, them being in the weight room. A lot of manual resistance stuff with their helmet off and doing manual resistance, neck strengthening. And then we've learned and educated ourselves. And it's not always about pushing on something. It's taking that impact. So we actually have guys lean into the head. So we strengthen the necks that way, because that's the way we're going to have that contact in a game. There's all kinds of things out there that I think a lot of, is beyond the high school, middle school level. It's even for us, the remote control dummies and things like that are great. They're extremely costly right now, so we don't have that. So we try and do the best we can. I think hydration is important, and we have hydration charts everywhere around the locker room that kids can see, and so they can visualize. Because the brain being a soft tissue, it's gonna, while it's not I'm not the doctor here on the panel, but I know it's not a muscle, but it acts like one. And so keeping the brain, keeping yourself hydrated is important. So all these things that we need to address head on, rather than just say, well, say football's safe and you're going to be okay. Because if we do that and we continue to, if we bury our head in the sand as a sport, then we are going to lose kids. And fortunately for us, we had just this year alone, I think it's been a point of emphasis, but we had over 50 more kids sign up for football than we did just a year ago. I think starting off in the flag, when we do it 5th and 6th grade, is sort of a good age for us, and it's worked. And then 7th and 8th grade is when we start our tackling. The question though at the end is all kinds of comes to, okay, when do you start? And I don't have the answer for that, but I do know there's so many different variables that for me, it really depends on the program. I feel really comfortable with middle school kids playing football in our program. I do, because of the men involved, the coaches that are involved, and because of the education piece. Now, I'm not naive to the fact that I've gone around to a lot of youth football practices, and I've seen some scary things that I wouldn't want kids to be involved in. And so I really think it depends. If we're still, if we're around some coaches that just think running into each other is effective, as a means of practice, then I wouldn't want kids to start tackle football early. If we're doing these things and we're taking the head out of it and we're not taking guys down to the ground in practice and we're teaching how to properly tackle, then I am comfortable. So I really just think it depends on the league. And so it's a difficult question to answer in terms of age. But I will say, first and foremost, get out, educate your coaches. If you're a high school coach, get your middle school coaches involved, because they want to be. I think that we found that rather than it be an inconvenience for them, they really get excited. They get excited that they're not only just an extension of our staff, but we do everything we can because it's genuine. We want that they're one and the same. They are part of our staff. And I think that's made a big difference. And then they want to do and learn more, and they're really eager to do so. It's not an inconvenience at all. And it's been a lot of fun. And so I think that's the things that we're doing in order to increase numbers. Otherwise, we are going to lose out on all the benefits that we know about team sports. And I think in particular in football, there is something really special about the actual ability of getting knocked up and getting knocked down and getting right back up. That's hard to replicate. And as we preach around here, it is teaching those life lessons that they're going to use forever. And so that grit and perseverance is really important. And we can do all these things, aren't mutually exclusive. We can do all these things and all these techniques. And I think from the sort of traditionalists, they may look and say, well, you're going to have a softer team or a softer program. And we find just the opposite. I think you can have a tough, hard-nosed football team and still use great fundamentals, great techniques, and to use all these different new equipment and research that we have, and to be smart about it. So for us, that's sort of our approach. At least so far in a short sample, it's worked. But we still, we're trying to learn and read and educate ourselves and learn as much as we can. So we do get those tough questions from parents. We're equipped to answer those and let them know and actually show them that we're doing everything we can to put their child in the safest position possible. And that's important to us for a number of reasons, obviously for the safety of the child, but really we want to keep this game going and get all the benefits that this great game gives to young people. So.
All right, Michael and David, thank you so much for sharing what you're doing in Fort Worth to make the game safer at both the high school and the youth level, and incorporating your high school coaches and your high school program into teaching at the younger levels. We now have Marty Rains joining us from Columbus, Ohio. Marty is the executive director of the Columbus Diocesan Recreation Association. She's been in that position for 11 years, but she's been involved in the league since 1988 as a coach and volunteer. The Columbus League has football, soccer, volleyball, basketball, cross country, track, softball, baseball, and serves over 7,000 children in the Columbus area. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention it is the home to Ohio State football. And I know I like to watch football, but I have a favorite football team, and was sort of happy when Ohio State got knocked off to let the Irish move up. Marty, I'm sorry, but I know your allegiance sits kind of with both teams. So welcome, Marty Rains.
Thanks, Kristen. And yeah, I root for both of those teams. And unfortunately for me, most of the time the games are on at the same time, so I have to decide who I'm going to watch. I kind of went a little different angle, I guess, at this. Obviously, I don't coach football, but I do enjoy watching it. We've had football in our diocese at this level. We start at 4th grade with tackle, and we have 4th through 8th grade. I usually work with just the elementary school kids. And I kind of looked back over the last 10 years or so. Last year, we had 515 kids playing on 26 teams. That was an average of about 20 kids per team. This year, we're down to 391 kids on 19 teams. So our numbers have really dropped this year in particular. As I researched back in 2010, we had over 900 kids playing, and we had 46 teams. So it's really dropped a lot in the last 8 years. When we saw this decline start, we explored some options as to what we could do to save our programs. And one of the things we checked out was the United States Football Heads Up Football program. And we are members of Heads Up Football. We started that in 2016. And basically, we have the coaches from Heads Up Football come in. We sponsor a clinic every July. We invite all of our coaches to come out. They can come in person, or they can come or they can take a training online, which they've all are required to do in order to coach in our program. They're very well attended. I can't say we have 100% compliance, but we're really close. A lot of our coaches have bought into the Heads Up Football program. As a matter of fact, they're the ones who brought it to me to say, hey, this is something we need to look at. Last year, when we saw that we had dropped about 1,000 kids or 100 kids in our program, the high school coaches voiced their concerns to us, as well as the high school athletic directors. And so we had a meeting in, I think it was May, and we were like, how can we save our program? So everyone who had a program, every parish that had a program, sent a representative. All the high schools, the Catholic high schools in Columbus, sent a representative. And they came up with the idea of, let's try to educate the parents and let the kids have some fun, kind of like what you guys were saying. And so what they did is we had something we called it Friday Night Lights. And the first 3 Fridays in May, each of our local high schools hosted our Friday Night Lights, where the high school coaches brought in some of their players, and we opened it up to all of our parishes, have the kids come. We did it kindergarten through 8th grade. Each night we had about 100 different kids there. We broke it down into stations where the kids could learn different techniques. They were working with the high school coaches as well as with their players. One of the neat things was that each team brought their high school players to the sessions, and you could see all the high schools working together to help the kids. And we had them all mixed together, and they did a lot of different drills. They did a tackling stage. They did an offensive line blocking stage. Talked about how to hit the tackling dummies. A lot of the heads up football drills that the coaches actually went through at their training, they used with the kids. There were passing, receiving drills. There was also defensive drills and forcing fumbles, and so they tried to cover everything. And at the end, they tried to do some different things that made it fun for the kids. I think it was 3rd graders and up had a pump, pass, and kick contest, and the younger kids, 1st, 2nd graders, were doing tug of wars. So it was really something cute, and I think the kids really enjoyed it. I think I said we had about 100 kids each night. I don't have the exact numbers as to how many are actually playing football for us this year in our elementary school levels, but I'd say at least 1/3 of them, maybe 1/2 of them, are playing in our programs. They kind of made it neat. They gave them bracelets and T-shirts and had a snack for them, those silicone bracelets. I think they said faith, family, and football. So we tied everything together. One of the other things I wanted to talk a little bit about were the changes that we've made in some of the rules. Now, remember, this is 4th through 8th grade. It is tackle. We do not have any kickoffs at any of the levels. The ball is placed at the 35-yard line, and that's where they start. If there was a safety, they place it at midfield. So we've eliminated that. There's free punts for the younger grades. I think it's something like a minimum of 5 players on the receiving team must be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage until the ball is kicked. I always have to look at these rules because I don't remember exactly what they are. We also are trying to encourage the kids to develop their skills. So on the extra point, we give 2 points if it's kicked, 2 points if it's a pass, and 1 point if it's a run. So we're trying to get them to develop different different techniques. We also have weight limitations. There's a preseason weigh-in, and if they're over a certain weight, they're labeled as an Xer or a striper. And there are certain rules for the Xers and stripers so that, for the safety of the kids. We do respect that some of the boys might not want to get weighed in if they're overweight or whatever. So some of the ones that we know are Xers or stripers will not have to weigh in. We also limit the number of practices and contacts. Once the season starts, they are limited to 1 hour of contact per week in addition to their game. And they can have no more than 5 days on the field per week. After the season starts, we're looking at 3 or 4 practices as well as the game. I'm not sure if that's something that happens all around, but I thought that was kind of interesting. We have heat conditions that we have to worry about. This year it was up through the middle of October, but we limit practices at that time to 1.5 hours, and we make sure that they have ample water breaks and ample water supplies on the fields. I was just checking earlier. We've had 2 concussions that have been reported to me so far this year. It was both 8th grade boys, and they both happened in the football game. I don't know about practice concussions. But in the state of Ohio, all of our coaches are mandated by law to take the concussion training course every 3 years. We also have a training that they have to go through that's sudden cardiac arrest training. And all of our coaches do that, as well as protecting God's children. And they have to do the Play Like a Champion coach training. Our officials are all Ohio High School certified. And as they are Ohio High School certified, they also have to have the concussion training. So we have a lot of people out there on the field who are aware. Parents also have to sign off that they at least know the restrictions or symptoms of the concussions. When it comes to our football finals, they're usually always held in one location, and we try our best to have an athletic trainer on site at those football games. One of the things that we're really concerned about is that the numbers are dwindling, and our parishes have had to combine in order to form teams. One of our biggest parishes, who used to be able to field a team at the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level, this year had 1 team at the 8th grade level. 2 of our other programs that are very strong traditionally, one of them we're looking at, this could be the last year for their football program because there just aren't the numbers. The other one has already been emailing me saying, what can we do? We got to do something about getting the numbers up. So we're really looking at options. We're very concerned. We want to be proactive. Our coaches are concerned about the future of football, and we don't know what we're going to do. It's not something that we're just seeing specifically at our Catholic schools. It's also in the secular district. Some of the high schools around Ohio are seeing a drop in numbers. Many of them don't have freshmen and JV teams anymore. Some of them are playing 8-on-8. In the public schools, they don't start tackle football until 7th and 8th grade. We do start it earlier. One of the big concerns that our coaches have is if we would go to flag for 4th, 5th, and 6th, are we going to lose the kids? Are they going to go out and join those programs in the community that have tackle at 4th, 5th, and 6th? And then can we get them back at the 7th and 8th grade level? So that's one of the biggest concerns that we have. We are looking at flag football. What we're seeing and thinking is if we can do a flag football program, we will be able to have a true 4th grade team, a true 5th grade team, a true 6th grade team. Right now with our tackle program, we have 4th and 5th graders playing together. We have 5th and 6th graders playing together. We have 7th and 8th graders playing together. So, obviously we know we've got to make a decision. We just don't know for sure what we're going to do. But with what we're looking with flag is it might be easier for the parishes to form teams in their own parish because you're going to need less numbers, less kids. And we're kind of up in the air. We don't know what we're going to do from here. But that's kind of some of the things that we've been doing. Some of our, I don't know how much I've said is going to be a lot of help to you, but it's what we're doing here in Columbus, and we don't by any means don't I have the answers for what's going on, but we all want to work together to save the football team, save the football program.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Marty. Tremendous job. A lot of great information. Real quick question for you while you're still on. Somebody had asked for context. You talked about decline in tackle football participation. Are the numbers in your other sports going up, or are they flat? I mean, can you kind of relate that real quick? Is football compared to other sports? You've got several.
I think our football program is seeing the most of a decline in numbers, but across the board, our numbers are going down. I just don't think there's as many kids out there. I think there's a lower a pool to draw from. We do see travel baseball, travel soccer, all year round basketball, soccer taken from our teams, but they are going down, but not as big a drop as what we're seeing in football.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Marty. And we're going to go through here. I want to just cover a few different things here as we kind of wrap up. We do understand and appreciate we're getting close to the top of the hour here. So we know some of you on lunch, whatnot, may have to go, but we're going to buzz through here. I just want to give you a few different things that a lot of the flag football piece we've covered thus far, but a few different resources you might want to check out as we go forward here. And then we do have several questions we want to get to. So we will go just past the hour, but we want to make sure we answer some questions. Real quick, and I would echo from my own experience, as many of you know, before I came on board as Play Like a Champion, I spent several years as the executive director of the CYO in Kansas City. And very similar in terms of the football experience to what Marty talked about in Columbus. So just for a little bit of context to say, you know, with Play Like a Champion, we're seeing this in several places around the country, the drop in tackle football. In fact, the numbers between Columbus and Kansas City, very similar. In 2010, we had about 48 teams, and that was down to about 24 last year. One of the interesting things we noticed when doing, you know, sort of research and conversation to figure out how do we keep kids involved is that the participation was not declining at the 8th grade level, and really not at the 7th grade level in terms of participation in teams in tackle football. It was decreasing at the younger levels. So we were 3rd through 8th grade up until a few years ago. And one of the things we did, at least on our side, to work on that is implement flag football. So we weren't sure if it would have a direct effect. We implemented flag football at the 2nd grade level, and then in 2015 made what was a difficult decision to actually replace our tackle football at the 3rd and 4th grade level with strictly flag. I would say we did this for 2 important reasons. Number one is we were dwindling. We went from 10 teams at the tackle in 3rd and 4th grade 10 years ago to having 3 to 4 teams, struggling to get 4 teams and having a division, you know, in 2015. For us, that worked in Kansas City. We actually doubled the number of kids participating in 3rd and 4th grade level football from going from tackle to flag. And actually that is now, I think, close to tripled from when we made that decision. So the number of teams and kids significantly increased at the 3rd and 4th grade levels just as a result of moving from tackle to flag. You know, the other piece of that, and I think this was mentioned earlier, that I think needs to be considered is, you know, the skill of the coaches and the ability to teach tackling and sort of adhere to all the things that, you know, maybe we can do really well in high school with coaches who are well trained and know what they're doing. But are we able to do that at the very youngest levels? So all those things need to be considered. So not to say that that's a fit for everybody, but just a context for something that worked in Kansas City. Now, I will say this, certainly not a popular decision with everyone. And our high school coaches were among those who really disagreed with moving the 3rd and 4th grade level to flag. I think there was a real concern amongst a lot of people that would get kids out of the program. I actually think the bigger concern, and maybe this goes to an overall theme with football in this country, is that we were going to start with 3rd and 4th grade, and then we were going to eliminate 5th through 8th grade eventually. And while that was never the goal and never even discussed as an option, that was a fear. So perhaps maybe a sign that we all need to work sort of collaboratively to make sure that, hey, we're in this to help provide opportunities for all the kids and really work to make football better, not to just sort of live on the extremes. On that note, one of the things that I wanted to mention when it comes to, and really you can talk about this in a lot of different levels, but flag football is certainly one. I put a handout in the handout section of the webinar we did here, so you can access this, and you can actually Google it online. One of the things that's gained a lot of media attention in the last month, the Aspen Institute released a paper where they basically posed as a national position that all football up until the age of 14 should be flag. And I think, as Joe referenced, as Dr. Congeni referenced earlier in our session here, that's something that has gained a lot of conversation lately. Should we have tackle football before high school? That certainly is one extreme. But I do think it's helpful to note, and you can look at their position and see why they said that, where they came up with that position of flag through 14. But I think it's important to note that most organizations that we find with Play Like a Champion are working much more nuanced in terms of, well, should we have tackle or flag at the second, third, fourth grade levels? We still see, by and large, tackle football being fairly strong at the middle school levels. And I think that's important to note as well. A few more quick things here, real quick hitters. Couple things that have been referenced on the note of sort of national conversation about tackle football. There are 5 states who have actually moved in the legislature to ban tackle football up to a certain age. 4 of them was 12. Maryland actually went to 14 with that bill. I will say that none of these bills have actually passed or made much movement in the state legislatures. There's some conversation about them being a little bit of a political campaign to kind of latch onto some of the publicity, but that is out there. And that is something we want folks to be aware of, because it's something you probably see in the news or maybe read the headline. There is additional reading material about that online. ESPN ran an article about it that was pretty extensive a few weeks ago. Couple more things, legal ramifications, always a concern, especially for youth organizations. As we talk about football and you hear some of the sort of fear that's out there. Interesting case that's going on, a class action lawsuit that was actually filed 2 years ago, still in process with Pop Warner, where 2 mothers are alleging in California that the deaths of their sons at ages 24 and 25 are tied to CTE that they claim was sustained during their children's participation in Pop Warner, a decade, 2 decades earlier. So that bears watching, and certainly no judgment has been rendered on that yet. We'll all be watching closely to see what happens there. But it is important and goes back to the idea of, do we have rules in place as organizations that are designed to promote the safety of our kids? Certainly some of those rules Marty hit, Dave and Michael hit really well in terms of rules that we have. 2 of them to take a look at, and I put one article that's received a lot of attention lately in the handout section about the kickoffs. Joe referenced this earlier there was a study done over the Ivy League, so this is college football level, that demonstrated an almost 70% drop in concussions simply by moving up the touchback line and up the kickoff line, essentially eliminating the number of kickoff returns that take place during a college football game. Those are rules that have actually been adopted by the NCAA for this year, and we'll continue to monitor those statistics. But thus far, looks as though decreasing kickoff returns is having an impact, at least in the early studies, of decreasing the number of concussions. And as Marty demonstrated, some leagues are even eliminating concussions, we'd love to eliminate concussions, eliminating kickoffs for that reason. Certainly targeting rules at the highest levels, the NFL and college have gotten a lot of notoriety, maybe some controversy in the last several weeks, the first couple months of the football season. And so those get a lot of publicity, but also interesting to note that the National Federation for High Schools, the NFHS, which governs most high schools nationally, and frankly, a lot of our youth programs as a result, has placed an emphasis on targeting rules as well, really trying to create a situation where all of our youth football nationally is, you're tackling for the sake of tackling, wrap, tackle, keep your head out of it, and not for the intent to injure, which is where targeting rules come into place. One final thing I would note, and I just encourage you to take a look at, there are new things popping up all the time, as Dr. Congeni said. They get this at their hospital all the time. New tips and tools and techniques and equipment and everything else, anything you can imagine that folks say will help eliminate concussions. And you need to be careful because a lot of those things are sales and marketing. But there are some really cool things that are coming out. And one that came out just last week out of Stanford University, they're working with Pop Warner, is a program called Collision Course that, for my money, and it's free, is one of the better programs I've seen targeted towards kids. It's actually a virtual reality platform, although there is just a YouTube video you can watch online, that attempts to the field and demonstrate some of the symptoms of a concussion. And then they use actually All-American football player Bryce Love, the running back for Stanford's football team, to basically describe the symptoms and the sort of quick, easy science behind a concussion, while encouraging high school football players to get out of the game if they feel any of these symptoms or think they may have any sort of head issues. So I thought that was a really cool thing. And again, not specific to or endorsing that, but something to take a look at. That's available for free on Pop Warner's website. They're using that program. But there's a number of different things out there that you can access. And we like to make those things available through our social media channels with Play Like a Champion whenever we see those, so that our partners can make use of them. So with that, we want to move on to questions. Real quick, we've got a number of questions here. And I'll bring our panelists back on board. I'm going to unmute all of you. Read through a few of the questions here in terms of we've gotten throughout the session. I want to start with Matt Hasher out of Philadelphia, who's their CYO director and partner with Play Like a Champion. Matt asked the question, and we've talked about this before, about the morality of football and all these things considered. His question is, there or should there be conversation as Catholic programs in viewing football from a moral standpoint? Can simply offering tackle football put our Catholic Church and youth programs in a difficult position morally? And so he wanted all of you to address that, and I would open that up as the first question, and then we've got just a couple more that we can follow up with. If you have thoughts on that, maybe Michael and Dave, we'll start with you as I see you up there. If you have thoughts on that.
I do. I think, from a morality standpoint, that if you're teaching the game the right way, and the way it's supposed to be played, and the value system, and stick to your core values. And so for us, just recently, actually, we put up our just big, huge sign across the wall on what our core values are as a football program, what the expectations are from coach to player, and so those things I think are important, because you're going to have a team culture, sort of a buzz phrase right now, regardless, good or bad. And I think if you can define those and then work towards those every single day, then you have to be intentional about it. And so what the game can teach, and doing things the right way, I really feel it can be done in a Christ-like manner. And so, yeah, I actually might probably lean, it sounds like in the question, on the other side. I think that it can only enhance those Christian and Catholic values.
And to me, it sounds like the question is, with all the research, and that, if there's one case of CTE being found, is it in our best? Is it moral to even put that out there? Is one too many, and things like that? And my response on that is, I think a lot of the research being out there, I think Joe did a great job in explaining what some of the flaws in the research and things like that. So I really feel like, morally, we're still really fine on that area. And then on top of that, it goes back to kind of what the purpose of your organization is. I know that our organization, our FWCFA organization, the guys who headed up for us, the football czar, Frank Paschal, give him a shout out, and Jim Breen. What they do a really great job of doing is making sure that there's a focus before and after every single game. And they do a fantastic job of really teaching the kids not just about the game of football, but the morals of it. And I know that I'm taking stuff away from it just listening about, finding your why and things like that. Man, they do a fantastic job just before and after every single game. And then just from a sportsmanship standpoint as well, these are all little things that we talk about within the Catholic Church of who we are as people, right? So the purpose of our organization is to enhance that, and so it depends on the people who's running it and really the lessons being taught from it. And so we're very fortunate to have guys like Jim and Frank and Coach Bowden who really believes and eats, sleeps, breathes this. So that's where my stance is on all of it.
Yeah, I think I would very much like to invite somebody who would ask that question to come with me for 30 years of being in high school locker rooms as a team physician and 10 years of playing myself, to see what you'd see in a locker room setting. I'm there during the week. I think going back to what I call the bedrock values, I think this sport really teaches it about as well as anybody can. My Christian values are extremely important to me, and if I see anything, that would be, out of bounds with this sport, but in fact, I actually see the opposite. I see people working together, pulling together, lifting each other up when they're hurting and down and other things, inside the locker room, outside the locker room, at school and other things. I just think it's actually one of the reasons that makes me really fight for this even more, is that I see so many good and positive things in the bedrock values of this sport that, there's some challenges that we have to figure out, but actually I think it fits really together very, very well with my Christian value system, my Catholic Christian value system.
Well, I would jump in here real quick, and I know from talking to Matt in the past, to probably be clear, I think a lot of people asking this question, Matt included, are fans of football, right? They're not. It's not coming from a place of sort of attacking it, but we're also being asked the question. I know bishops and leadership in the church, in terms of that question, from a Catholic standpoint, are asking that question because a lot of people only see what's on the news, and sometimes that's a headline that makes it sound like there's a ton of danger and no benefit. So, probably a different conversation there, but I think those are tremendous insights by all of you. So great job.
And I'd like to pose a question here from Jamie Nowini, who is from the Cleveland CYO. And so I know Joe works directly with that system. And his question is about rookie tackle. And he says that this is a kind of a new concept of 7-on-7 tackle football. Smaller field, no special teams, offensive and defensive linemen are in a 2-point stance. And he says, being new this year, parents and coaches and kids have loved it. Michael and Dave, you said you use that. Can you speak to the benefits of that, maybe versus flag?
Yeah, we have not gone to that model yet, but we have done a lot of research. So we go right now from flag in 5th and 6th, not flag, but it's a touch football, 7-on-7 version, and then in 7th and 8th into tackle. I would love to have this in USA Football put something out about this as well. It's sort of every other sport sort of has that progression. So if you look at, I know it's a different animal, but if you look at T-ball to coach pitch to baseball, and so it's kind of a logical progression where you're introducing some contact, but eliminating a lot of sort of some of the more intense or severe collisions. So this is something that we've actually talked about and looked into as sort of a transition between our current 7-on-7 in our tackles. So something I'm very interested in, but frankly don't know a lot about just yet as we started to look into it.
Yeah, I coached it in the Cleveland Diocese, a version of it with my second son, and the field isn't as wide either. We go from the far hash to the sideline, and so I think the collisions, people are not, there isn't as much distance between running and other things. It's in a smaller area and a smaller number of athletes, and I'm pretty encouraged by it. And I think it's still, I coached both. I coached flag, and as I said, I think there's different skills that make people really good at flag. But I think it was more like football. I thought it was a reasonably progressive step, and I'm encouraged, and I'm glad to hear from somebody like Jamie, who's got the dirty hands down on the field, that he's seeing good success with it this year.
Thank you. We'll look for more information on that to come. And then we also have another comment from Philadelphia from Jason Budd, and he is asking a recommendation. He said they're looking at creating a flag option as an additional option to their tackle football. And he wonders we run in the fall alongside the tackle option, or perhaps in the spring, independent of the tackle football season. And he'd love people's thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I think it might be difficult to run at the same time in the fall, but I think it's a sort of a trial in the spring to see with the interest level. And what we found, well, hopefully, and we're sort of at the beginning stages of this, because we sort of have a resurgence of the whole youth football program, but getting them playing football, right? So I think that's what flag can do, and then it's our job from there to teach it safely and then keep them involved in the game. So I think it's a good way to introduce it, especially for those who are scared to kind of take that first step, or families that might not know a lot about it. If they see a significant drop in numbers, I think the 7-on-7 flag option is good to introduce them. And then now it's your job to have that. Now you have that access, so it's your job to then keep them involved in this great game.
I know one of the concerns we had when we were looking at and talking about doing flag in the spring was use of facilities and conflicts with other sports that the kids are involved in. A lot of our kids will try to run track and play softball and baseball, and if we throw flag football in there, I'm not real sure we're going to have enough facilities and kids to make it go. So that was one of our concerns.
Oh, sorry, Pete, we're talking over each other. I was going to mention the question from Victor. Were you too, Pete?
Yeah, I was actually going to go to, that component right there. That'll work. Yep.
I thought that might be a nice way to end.
Yep.
Analyst weigh in because his question, and he's saying hi to everybody from Mexico City. What is your best advice to give to parents about trust in tackle football?
Well, I'll take it away. I think that really the trust has to happen in an open, honest dialogue. I think immediately there's going to be a wall built if we just deny that there's not inherent risk. So I think that's important to note that we understand there's some risk. We also understand that there's inherent risk in all sports, right? And so that's the first step. And then the second step is, okay, how are we addressing that? And how are we doing everything humanly possible to keep your child safe? And here are the things. At that point, they have to make a decision as a family, and we'll respect that. But hear us out first. Let's have a conversation about, okay, these are the risks, and these are all the things, like the things we talked about during the session, is these are things we're doing to keep your child as safe as possible. And I think that's how you start to build that trust. Again, it goes back to having open and honest conversation, and not burying your head in the sand and saying it doesn't exist.
I'd have to agree with that. One of the other things that I would throw in would be that we are making sure that our coaches are trained so that they know the proper techniques and everything to teach the kids.
Terrific. Well, I think with that we can wrap up. I know we've gone a little bit over the hour, but people have stayed. So clearly, this great group of panelists tremendous information and insights, and we're just, as Kristen said, absolutely thrilled to have each of you involved. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, the whole presentation, we do intend to send it out. We should have a video recording that we can send out to everybody who was on board. So even if folks had to duck out early, they can view the rest of it. So yeah, tremendous opportunity to have all of you involved, and really appreciate your insight. Kristen?
Thank you to everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the fall as we go into the holiday season. I know we'll all be counting our blessings with you as our national community top of that list. So thank you to the panelists, but thank you to everyone who joined us, and have a wonderful rest of the fall sports season.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.